All right, so now we'll get things started. Well, first of all, welcome to Global Starts Local. Can mayors win the battle against climate change? My name is Owen Eagan. I'm a West Hartford resident, a recent graduate of Georgetown University, and before that of Northwest Catholic High School, and I'll be attending the Georgetown University Law Center this coming fall. This presentation tonight will be based on the thesis that I completed at Georgetown this past year through Georgetown's Government Honors Program. First, I want to thank you all for coming. I see so many friendly and familiar faces in the crowd, and I'm just moved that so many people are able to come out and be here. Second, I would like to thank West Hartford Libraries, and in particular the Noah Webster branch, for hosting us here, and Joe Cadu, with whom I worked to arrange this event. Third, I would just like to proceed with the lesson that I hope that you gain from this presentation here tonight. We see challenges in this world, problems that are massive in scale. They seem far too big for one person to take on, and they make us feel small, they make us feel little. Sometimes they seem to paralyze us. But my message here tonight is that all of you have the power and the influence to go out and change the world around you. Today we're talking about climate change, and we're talking about sustainability issues. But tomorrow's issue will be different. My message is that you have the power to change the world. And now I would like to introduce an energetic and passionate local leader. We're very lucky to have her here tonight, Mayor Shari Cantor. I would first like to read a bit about her background so that we can appreciate her remarks here tonight. Cheri Kanter is the Mayor of West Hartford. She joined the Town Council in 2004 and served as Deputy Mayor from November 2011 to May 2016. Cheri chairs the Finance and Budget Committee, has chaired the Community Planning and Human and Leisure Committees. She has served on all town committees as Deputy Mayor and Mayor. Cheri is a registered CPA, and her work experience includes public accounting at PricewaterhouseCoopers, formerly Coopers & Lybrand, and in the insurance industry at Cigna. In addition to her service on other internal committees, she is also the liaison to Government Affairs, Education, Ethics, and Rules Committees, and the Senior Citizen Advisory Commission. Cheri has served on the University of Connecticut, as a University of Connecticut trustee since 2013. She is a West Hartford Rotarian, a member of the Board of Food Share, the Board of the American School for the Deaf, the Greater Hartford Jewish Federation, the West Hartford Art League, and will be a member of the new CCMC Foundation Board. Cheri and her husband Michael co-chaired the Hartford Symphony Orchestra Gala in April. And after hearing that long list of accomplishments, I would just like to add that I spoke with Mayor Shari Cantor. I was very fortunate to interview her for my thesis, and I can tell you that she is a friend to the environmental cause in our town and outside in the global environment. So without further ado, ladies and gentlemen, Mayor Shari Cantor.
And vertically challenged to boot. Thank you all for being here. It is a beautiful night out there, and we can hear some background music, I think, as we gather. I am so impressed with Owen. He is remarkable. You will all learn so much, and what an inspirational comment to talk about how things can be overwhelming, but we can make a little bit of a difference every day and make our world, our community, and our world a little bit have a positive impact. And keep that thought, because it's so important to start small, and hopefully we can use each other as networks. I want to recognize my fellow town councilors that are here with me. Leon Davidoff is in the back, I think. Leon, raise your hand. And Chris Barnes, our minority leader, Chris Barnes is here. Is there anybody else? Our state rep, Derek Slapp, is here in the back. Is there anybody else that? And those of you on the commission, our energy commission, do you want to just raise your hand? Yep. Okay. I will refer to you a little bit in a little bit. And also we have CT Sustainable. We have, I know Jane, I was introduced by Jane's an intern for CT Sustainable CT, and I don't know if there's anybody else here. Oh, okay, so your name is Nadia. Okay, so Nadia has joined us as well. As Owen was saying, that local action is more important now than ever. As we see our state struggle with financial challenges. They actually used the energy efficiency funds for other purposes. So they were saved for energy efficient projects, and those funds were actually swept and used for to fill some gaps. And we also have had program cuts across the board, but we also have had federal level funding cuts. So the state has reacted to federal opportunities that are no longer there, or lack of opportunities that are no longer there. So if we don't take action and make small changes, nothing, things won't happen. And this is really important to our quality of life. West Hartford is a bright spot. We've been focused on energy efficiency, conservation for a very long time. And we're really lucky to have incredible resources in our community that care about this and understand that it makes sense. It's not just, you want to breathe cleaner air. It makes economic sense, and it makes sense for all of us to live in a community that cares about the impact on our bigger community, on the state, and on our country and in the world. Owen is a perfect example of the impact and change that you can bring. He's contacted, and you will hear much more, many mayors to find out what they're doing, providing a network for all of us to understand what other communities are doing locally. So we all are going to learn a lot from this. This actual report is, I think, this big. I ran out of printer paper and toner printing it. So there you go. We also were sort of early to hire an energy specialist. We hired Catherine Deviney, who would be here, but it's her son's 13th birthday. But she started actually as an energy specialist to look at our energy bills and get an understanding of what it all meant. It was really hard for our town to have the resources and expertise to really make heads or tails of our energy bills and to understand what we can do to cut those costs and conserve energy. And she has made a remarkable difference and saved the town millions of dollars and make us all a cleaner, safer, better community. And I wish I was here to thank her, but please, all of you, if you see her and meet her, thank her. She's remarkable. The town's Clean Energy Commission, two of the members are here. I don't know if any more will be coming, but our group of residents that actually have, many of them either have an interest or expertise in this field, they promote energy efficiency both in town operations and the business and residential community, and have embraced a vision of 100% West Hartford, meaning that West Hartford will be 100% renewable energy by 2050. That is a good goal. Kingswood Oxford, just our neighbor across the street from the library, is actually working, the robotics team is working with the commission on an electric vehicle demo day this fall. So if that's something that you can go to, and again, I think it's students learning firsthand how to demo an electric vehicle and the impact on the environment. WHCTV, I want to thank for being here. Also airs renewable energy projects and a lot of other energy projects that educate our community on what other people are doing. And it's very, very, a really wonderful, entertaining way to learn about what is going on in your community. We also have Deb Rowe, a part-time librarian at Faxon, who holds sustainability talks and is helping to plan Local 350 Connecticut Climate Jobs Justice Rally preceding the Global Climate Action Summit in California in September. So remarkable, remarkable residents that care very much and do little things every day. Maybe not so, some of them not so little. There's a lot going on. I encourage you to seek each other out, talk to each other, find out, make connections, and find out how you can help. The more we work together as a community, the more we understand the impact on climate change, not only on our life, on our budgets, will be very, very helpful. We are working hard, like I said. Catherine has led the charge. We are continuing to install energy efficiency projects like LED lighting and building control systems. Not easy in retrofitting older buildings that have this kind of aging infrastructure, but we've done a lot, and we have reduced our town's energy use by 15% in 5 years. In the meantime, expenses for transmission on energy have gone up pretty dramatically, but we have held actually our budget stable and even decreased it because of the efficiency savings we've had. We have about a $4.1 million budget item on energy costs, just energy use. We also invest in additional renewable energy projects each year to save money, and we work on reducing consumption, right? So we invest in those projects, and we also have funds to offset some of those costs that come up to maintain those projects. Just this year, coming year, King Philip Middle School and Town Hall will be installing large solar arrays, and the town has just started participating in a virtual net metering arrangement where 15% of our electricity is produced by a solar farm, a relatively new solar farm in Thompson, Connecticut. So this year, West Hartford also joined a statewide initiative called Sustainable CT that I referred to before. The motto is Local Actions, Statewide Impact, and we will be pursuing certification this fall, completing voluntary actions in a broad range of categories, such as thriving local communities, well-stewarded land and natural resources, vibrant and creative cultural ecosystems, dynamic and resilient planning, clean and diverse transportation systems and choices, efficient physical infrastructure and operations, strategic and inclusive public services, healthy housing options, inclusive and equitable community impacts. So this makes us think about how we plan and the impacts on these critical items, these strategic items, and how we handle them going further. So we seek community output. Many of our great ideas come from you, our residents. So you see things that we might drive by and not notice, and we are a little busy running from one thing to the next, but it's you that really open our eyes to ideas and ways that we can maybe fix a problem or handle something a little bit differently. So again, I want to thank Owen for the great work he did. We're all going to learn a lot tonight. For all of you for coming, for the library, for having this great facility and space and all the work they do, and for WHCTV for sponsoring. Thank you again.
Great. So as I get the PowerPoint set up here, first I would like to thank Mayor Cantor for those great and informative remarks and for being here. I think her presence here tonight shows the emphasis that our town places on this very important issue. And I would also like to add that in regards to the Sustainable Connecticut program, this program tonight gains our town 5 points toward a bronze level certification in that program. So I think that's a pretty good thing. So now that we have the PowerPoint set up, first of all, can everyone still hear me from here? Is this okay? Swirl it? Is this okay? Okay, great. Don't want to be locked up behind that. First, I would like to begin by asking you all a question. The very first one is, who out there got one of the free reusable grocery bags? Awesome. So I hope you guys use them. And my advice to you from talking to a few different people is that if you leave them in your car, they'll be there when you get to the store, and then maybe you'll use them a little bit more. It's always good to lower impacts where we can. The second question I have for you all is, can you please raise your hand if you've heard of something called the Mayor's National Climate Action Agenda? Sometimes it's called Climate Mayors. Okay, the Sustainable CT folks. I see the Energy Commission. Yeah, okay, all right. So a few people, but we're going to touch on that tonight. That was the subject of my thesis, and we're going to get through that as we go on in our presentation. And now I have one more question for you all, and this one is a rhetorical question. So no more hands. How do our directors in Hollywood portray an event or a phenomenon that reaches around the globe or that affects many different geographic areas at one time? Often, they'll break it up. They'll show us different scenes and snippets, sometimes from around the world, right? To get us the feeling that, wow, this event, whatever it is on screen, is happening in a lot of different places, sometimes in different ways at once. So you can picture a scene going from New York to Chicago to Mumbai, India, to Tokyo, Japan, to Los Angeles, all of these cities, and eventually you get the idea, wow, this is happening around the world. So the director, Ronald Emmerich, used this technique in 2004. If any of you have seen the movie The Day After Tomorrow, to portray those great big ice storms that hit many cities around the world. And I would like you to keep that in mind as we go on. So here is a map of the United States of America. Keeping that tactic in mind that Hollywood directors use, what if I told you that in Hayward, California, Mayor Barbara Halliday told me that in her city of 100,000 people on the San Francisco Bay, she is extremely worried about wildfires, just like the wildfires that are happening at this very moment in California near Yosemite National Park. And she also mentioned that sea level rise is going to impact her coastal real estate in her town. She's very worried about it in her city of 100,000 people. And what if I added after that in San Marcos, Texas, Mayor John Tomides, who I talked to, San Marcos is a little bit smaller than West Hartford, is very worried about the river flooding that sometimes occurs in his area. In 2015, his area, which is used to flooding, experienced a massive one that took many neighborhoods and washed through their foundations. His community is very worried about that topic. And what if I added that up in Missoula, Montana, Mayor John Engine, who is the mayor there, Missoula is a college town, it's a little bit bigger than West Hartford. Mayor Engine is a lifelong resident, and he explained that when he was a child, wildfire season is normal out there. He was able to notice a few smoky days when he was a child. It was just a regular part of the summer. And now, if you talk to him, he says that the wildfires have gotten so bad that the smoky days can seem endless. Moreover, the rivers in his area have started to flow differently. The beetles in the forests that are killing them are starting to behave differently. Animals are starting to behave differently. So that's happening in Montana. Meanwhile, in Miami, Florida, I was able to speak with the Chief of Staff to Mayor Francis Suarez, and he explained to me that this is surprising to me. The residents of Miami voted to tax themselves in the amount of $200 million in what's called a general obligation bond in order to fund coastal resilience efforts, like putting up seawalls and installing pumps to keep the water out. So if you can picture it, West Hartford's budget is north of $280 million every year. And this one city spent most of that, $200 million of our town's entire budget, in order to build up their resilience to rising seas. This is happening down there, and people are worried about it. And what if I told you that finally, when I spoke to our very own Mayor Shari Cantor, she expressed to me that the issues that we're seeing with these changes in our weather are worrisome for our citizens, and they're worrisome for our safety. So all of that together, what does that tell me, all these snippets from around the country? They tell me that this is not a day after tomorrow issue. This is not an issue that can wait. This is an issue that's happening now, and that communities are already spending hundreds of millions of dollars to repair. It's things that people are noticing all around the country. So my next question is, why is this happening? Where does this come from? According to our best science, where does this issue begin? Well, this source from NASA that we have sort of explains it. The sun emits massive amounts of radiation all the time. They come through our atmosphere, and we see them every day in the form of visible light that allows us to see the world around us, and also in the form of UV radiation, the kind we wear sunscreen to protect ourselves from. So just like it happens on the blacktop or to a rock on the road, this shortwave radiation enters the matter, and the matter converts it to long-wave radiation. That's the heat. These things heat up. And the Earth, it re-emits that heat into the atmosphere. Some of it filters back into space, but there are particles in our atmosphere that reflect it back down. These are particles like CO2, carbon dioxide, or methane, CH4, that ricochet these particles back down to Earth. Now, you can read in the New York Times, and they have a great explanatory piece on this. They would say, without these gases, the Earth would be a frozen wasteland. We really need them to survive. They're beneficial for us. They cause the heat from our sun to come back down and heat our planet. The problem comes when these gases that let light in but don't let heat out keep too much heat. We add too many more gases to the air through our production in industry, through our transportation, through our burning fossil fuels to heat our homes and drive our cars. All of that emits more of these particles, carbon dioxide and a whole slew of others, that cause this planet to heat up. This is called the greenhouse gas effect, because like a greenhouse in the summertime, or like your car, a greenhouse in the wintertime, or your car in the summer, light comes in, but heat can't escape. So we're just it's getting so hot on this planet. And that's the best theory we have. So does this have potential dangers attached to it? Yes. Yes, it does. That was what my literature review covered when I went through my thesis. The U.S. Global Change Research Program is a federally funded program that produces these big, thick reports. The 2017 report from this group within the government showed that, according to their best projections using weather data, climate data, the warming patterns that we're seeing can produce more heat waves. They can produce droughts. They have a high potential to produce what are called high-level precipitation events where there are downpour scenarios, a lot of rain. All of these things can affect us. And as you can see, you can guess with issues with flooding, you can guess with issues of our more vulnerable residents dealing with heat, more elderly people, children. All of these people are affected by this increase in heat. Also, we have data from, this is the logo for the Universal Ecological Fund. They produced a recent study in 2017 that showed some of the more monetary economic impacts of these storms. According to this report, when you compare the number of storms causing $1 billion of damage or more within the 1980s decade to the number of those storms that happened between the years 2007 and 2016, you find that the number of storms causing that $1 billion in damage increased by over 4 times. We are seeing that many more storm events in America that cause that much damage. So you can see it's damaging and threatening to people's lives, to their welfare, and also to our economy. But have we seen this so far? The answer is yes. This you'll note is the observed change in heavy precipitation. When comparing between 1958 and 2012, the U.S. Global Change Research Program found that right up here in the Northeast, we've experienced 71% more storms that are in that high-level category. They're severe, heavy precipitation events. If you think that you've noticed in the time that you've been alive that the storms seem to be strange, they seem to be stronger, the seasons don't seem to be the same way that they were when you were a kid, of course, we can't pin any one event to this theory and call it, and draw a one-to-one comparison. But your observation fits in with the general trend that people are seeing in the scientific community and in our government. So then we reach annual temperature. This is also observed. This is not any projection. This is just looking at climate data that we have. You can see right up here in the Northeast, we've experienced over 1.5 degree average change in our daily weather when comparing the periods 1901 to 1960 and the more modern period of 1986 to 2016. We're getting more of these, our days on average are hotter. That means some might be a little colder, some might be a little hotter, but on average we are getting up. Some reports would put that number as high as 2 degrees and more in our area. And now we reach more of the potential dangers. These are projections. These aren't what we've seen before. And you can see that under a higher emission scenario, one in which we keep using our resources, we keep burning fossil fuel, we reach, you can read down here, New England, if you see the shading they have there, would experience, it's projected, but somewhere between 10 and 30 degrees above, more days in which the degrees were above 90 every year. Imagine you walk outside, I walk outside when it's 90 degrees and you say, wow, it's hot. It's kind of oppressively hot out here. Imagine doing that up to 30 times more per year. And that's where we're headed under this higher level emission scenario. It's experienced in worse areas in Florida, all around the country, but just in our very own area. And by the mid-century, by the mid-21st century, 2050, a year that is not that far away, that's what's going to be experienced according to these projections. Another projection is another danger that we have, sea level rise. According to the intermediate scenario, we keep emitting gases up until at high levels, at intermediate levels. We experience between 4 and 5 feet of sea level rise. And that's by 2100. So if you even it out, it would be about a foot every 20 years or so that we would see rising on our coast. That might not seem that much. You know, I could picture someone saying, "Well, I stand over 5 feet tall. You know, that's not that much. That's not that much different. That's not that much more water." But the problem here is storm surge. The waves that are sitting on top of that water and that come in during heavy storms are enough to overwhelm a lot of our coastal defenses that we have already. You know, picture the damage of Hurricane Sandy, but more dangerous than that. And we also have defense implications. Up here we have General Paul J. Selva. He's a vice chairman in the Joint Chiefs of Staff, and he testified to the Senate Armed Services Committee a few months ago and said that the climate changes that we've already begun to see have started to impact our safety abroad. He said that we've already seen disputes rise along the Nile River as it continues to get hotter and hotter in that region of Africa. And he projected, this was his projection, that off the coast of Somalia, where the fish stocks are apparently declining, Somalian piracy would increase because people wouldn't have enough food there, enough resources to get from the ocean to feed themselves. So we can see there the general concept that as the world gets hotter, as our climate becomes more unreliable, we experience defense implications as well. Countries around the world destabilize, and that affects our safety here at home. It would be really easy to recruit, for instance, a person with no resources and no way to make a living in some parts of the world against our country. So this is another reason that we should act on this issue. And now we reach the question, what are we doing? So we've talked about all the problems now. What are we doing to find a solution? Well, according to the New York Times, that released an EPA environment scorecard about 9 months into the current administration, just using a pure quantitative approach, counting, they managed to find that the current administration has only, at that point, had introduced about 1,900 new environmental actions through its EPA. Meanwhile, the previous administrations, a Republican administration, the Democrat administration, had both admitted. We'll pause here. Had both entered many more. And also, we find that in Congress, I don't think I even need a slide on this one. We also see division. We see gridlock, and we see not as much as we would like to see getting done. That's true on the environmental front as well. Some people might remember who've been in the environmental field longer than I have that the golden era of environmental policymaking was in the 60s and 70s when these wide-ranging acts came out. The National Environmental Policy Act, the Clean Air Act, the Clean Water Act, following the advocacy headed up by Silent Spring, that book on the environment, caused the Congress to come together and create all these wide-ranging laws. After that, Congress slowed down and sort of puttered out to a stop. And it requires a lot of consensus to pass a wide-reaching law on something like this. So regulations still come from the federal government, but these heavier laws that can make a bigger impact aren't. So we see the administration and Congress isn't really picking up and moving on this issue. And now we reach the point of our topic. When the national government fails and does not pursue action on an issue that's usually its prerogative, what are we left with? We just sit and wait? No. We stand up as a state and we stand up as a locality and make some changes. And now I'm going to tell you how mayors are especially well positioned to do this. So this is data from the Pew Research Center on the favorability ratings, you can say popularity ratings, of various levels of government. We see that generally the federal government has declined all the way down to 30%. The last data point on that was in 2013. We see the state government hanging a little higher, between 50 and 60%, but the local government, I mean, all the way here since 2002, from 2002 to 2013, between 60 and 70% of people thought their local government was doing a pretty good job. So people really support their local government, and meanwhile they don't think the federal government is doing that great of a job. So that means that mayors have the basis of support that they need to pursue action on this change. You could argue against a mayor pursuing action on this, saying, well, they're elected to lead our localities, aren't they? That they're not really positioned to work on the global stage. But the answer is that yes, they are. They see, as you saw across the country, these issues are affecting their constituents, and they choose to act. And that's what I found in the course of my thesis. Moreover, they have the powers to act. A lot of mayors have various powers over zoning and transportation regulations, which can really change the ways that their communities use fossil fuels. We also see that the federal government has lost one of its major bargaining chips, funding that it used to give to municipalities. A source from 2005 says that while in 1978, federal funding for municipalities was an average about 17% of their budgets, it's decreased to under 5% today. Again, that source is from 2005. I looked through the West Hartford budget a little bit before this presentation and found a little bit of federal funding, but nothing to make a substantial percentage impact. And so that seems to be true in our case today. The federal government, while they would normally pursue a policy and sort of be able to induce states to follow it by having money to give, now doesn't have the money. So what the mayors say, well, I have the support, this is an issue, why should I listen to you? I should move on this policy, I should act because this is important. And now mayors, with this support, with this basis, they've pursued certain localized solutions to this problem. We see the United States Conference of Mayors in 2005 released something called the Mayor's Climate Protection Agreement. That followed the Bush administration's removal of itself from the Kyoto Protocol, sort of that day's Paris Agreement. That has over 1,000 signatories across the country. Climate mayors, the Mayor's National Climate Action Agenda, the subject of my thesis that I mentioned earlier, that has over 400 mayors involved, including, both of these, by the way, include West Hartford. Scott Slifka was a signer of the previous agreement, and we are a signer of the more recent one through Mayor Cantor. These agreements position the towns to enact changes on these policies, usually favoring the Kyoto Protocol, favoring the Paris Climate Accord. And these are just two of many. One of the others is the ICLEI. This is a non-governmental organization called Local Governments for Sustainability. Since the late 80s and early 90s, they've had something called the Cities for Climate Protection Program, and they've linked over 1,000 cities together across the world in order to, again, enact change on this issue. There are so many others, and that just shows that around the world, I think because of the new connectivity that we've experienced in the last few years through the expansion of the internet and all of the ways that we can get in touch with each other, have built some of the networks that Mayor Cantor is talking about. Across the world, cities are not just collaborating on climate change, they're collaborating on law enforcement, they're collaborating on policy ideas. There's a rapidly expanding network to the point that one commentator from Yale calls for a world parliament of mayors to be formed. He wants to get all the mayors together at a large meeting to share policy ideas. And that's where the world seems to be moving, according to my research. And we get back to the town of West Hartford. According to my research, my look at the towns across the country, West Hartford is doing a great job. We're actually pursuing, without being involved in the Cities for Climate Protection Program, which could be looked at as a gold standard of getting a city on board with sustainability, we've already started to pursue the same steps that they advocate. We've already started to track our energy usage and implement changes in order to slow it down. We've already started to install solar panels on a lot of our buildings and heat pumps that use the ground's thermal temperature to help to heat the buildings in order to lower their energy costs. So this shows that West Hartford is on board. We are leading in this area, and we will continue to do so. And this is from the Clean Energy Commission. It talks about the stat that Mayor Cantor had mentioned earlier, that drop in energy usage that's pictured within the last 5 years. But we see that the municipal energy usage is only 5% of what the town has used. That's why the question is, the town of West Hartford is saving energy. Are you on board? What are you doing? So the residential usage is about 48%, so it's split about evenly in half between residential and commercial. So there's a lot of room for improvements. And you see what can you do down below, and we'll cover that at the end. So first, I also would like to address the concerns. There are people out there that would say, okay, so a few towns get together, a few cities get together. What are the numbers here? They're small fish. They can't really do much to change this global issue, to fight for sustainability across the world. Well, I'm going to give you some numbers. 2040. By 2040, the World Watch Institute predicts that the majority of world regions, including Africa, will be majority urban. We see all over the world people are increasingly moving into cities. 6.3 billion. By 2050, the same World Watch Institute reports that that's how many people will be living in our cities by then. 6.3 billion individuals. 75%. That's how many. That's what proportion of emissions that cities produce. Cities, the centers of industry, the centers of production, centers of transportation, where everyone commutes, produce 75% of our emissions. That's the majority. If we can solve the problem on the city level, 75% would tell me we've almost solved the problem for the entire world. 7,500. This is around how many mayors have signed on to the Global Covenant of Mayors for Climate and Energy. That is, picture climate mayors, but global. This grouping of mayors attempting to enact sustainability policy. And 40%. According to America's Pledge, another NGO in America also fighting for this cause, out of the communities like West Hartford that have proposed greenhouse gas reductions policies, they represent 40% of our country's emissions. So the answer to people saying, well, what's the impact is, there certainly will be an impact, and these numbers illustrate that fact. And now we reach, what can you do? That part of the graphic that I made for my graphic design class this past year. I tried to get the idea here. So you see a house, and if you see its impact on the rest, if you remember the rest of the poster, it's billowing out the smokestack, and it runs into the city at the top. So that's what's happening. You know, your little friendly house here is actually producing. It's like a factory of death right here. It's producing all of these emissions. So that's the problem. It's a graphic that should explain that. And the other, I'll conclude this presentation by saying, what can you do? We've talked about it, and now what actions, we're taking actions on the town level. What actions can we all take as community members to really change this issue? Well, the first one is that you can schedule a home energy audit. A lot of times, these are free, as I learned at the most recent West Hartford Clean Energy Commission meeting. It's free. It's often free to the homeowner. You can call in someone. They go through your house, tell you where the problem spots are, where you're losing energy, and in order to lower your bills, that they advise you on a way that they can come in and adjust your housing to make it more energy efficient. Oftentimes you won't really see a bill for this either, because Eversource is involved in the process, and they can just add a little bit onto your bill over the course of a few years. And often people don't even notice the difference, I've heard, and within a few years you'll be saving money on home electricity costs. You can also inspect your home's insulation. This is, without going for a full-blown energy audit, there are different ways you can look at where heat's leaking out of your house and figure out ways to stop it. Maybe get one of those snakes that fits under your doors, maybe get some thicker shades that can keep more of that heat in. Look at your light bulbs. This is pretty simple. You look and you find LED light bulbs or old incandescents where you get the most efficient light bulb you can. And then you support solar panels. These are still expensive for many and cost prohibitive for many homeowners, but as Mayor Shari Cantor said, that there are projects being initiated in Connecticut. So if you get involved and advocate for them, there's a bigger chance that we as a state can embrace this to a greater degree. Electrify your lawn equipment. This can be a point of division. I know some people really like their old lawnmowers, I think that this can be, for most people, a 5 to 10 year decision. Maybe you start by taking your weed whacker and making that electric. And then you figure that works pretty well, so then you move on and you get a leaf blower. And you start to electrify your lawn equipment that way. It's all about these little steps, little things you can do to change your habits. And then you can think about a hybrid or electric car. This, for many people, is probably a 10 to 15 year decision. You know, once your current automobile stops working so well. And as you'll see come September at our electric car show here in West Hartford, that can be a pretty attractive option. A lot of these cars are pretty nice. Invest in green companies. Ireland recently did this just this week. They divested their own funds from fossil fuels. So you can follow them and think green. when you invest. Look into your portfolio and see if it really aligns with your values. Then clean out your email. This was an interesting one. I actually credit this to Deb Rowe, who sent it to me in a list that she had produced. The extra emails that we keep do produce greenhouse gases because it takes data centers electricity to store them. So all those spam emails you got 5 years ago are helping to hurting the environment, and that's pretty great. You can clean out your email inbox right from home and do just a little bit to help the environment. Be active in your community. I would hope that, especially after this presentation, it doesn't just end here. Please get involved. Look into ways that you can participate in your town. Come to a Clean Energy Commission meeting. Get involved in Sustainable Connecticut. Go to that rally that Ms. Rowe is helping to schedule later this year. There's so many ways you can get involved, and I hope your advocacy doesn't stop here. And then 10, the old adage, reduce, reuse, and recycle. Just take a little bit of time to think about how your habits every day maybe do something to affect the environment. There's a lot of different ways you can do it. Maybe buy something used as opposed to going for the new one. Maybe don't order something that comes from really far away. Maybe try to eat more locally. There are so many ways that you can just take these little steps in order to change the world. And that's the message. If we all just do a little bit, we can make a huge difference across the world. Thank you very much. And you can feel free to reach out to me with any questions. I will be sending an email after this with a summary of the lecture as well as those 10 points you saw and some helpful links that can help you get more involved. So please feel free to reach out. And now we've reached the point in our presentation where you guys can ask some questions. So Mayor Cantor and I are going to come to the stage, and we will feel free to take any questions that you have, and I would appreciate any question.
Well, I'll start. Actually, a comment. When I did not address the climate impact on West Hartford, as Owen had discussed, there were some other mayors that he had touched base with that shared climate impact, but we've had really big storms. We had snow events that were record, 35 plus inch storms that were really did impact our public safety, our public works, the cost to our community. We had Storm Alfred that was actually the financial impact of cleanup alone was over $12 million to the town of West Hartford. And we've had significant flooding events, more significant flooding events. So we really do, on this particular issue, feel it very, very intensely. So these impacts, what's happening around on the coast, do impact the Northeast and Connecticut very, very much. So I know you're all aware of it, but I just wanted to share that. I'm sure you have questions. It's in the back. Yes, there are. Yes, we have a hierarchy of roof projects. We have to redo roofs first, and then put the solar panels on. So it is going in a bit of an order, and we are doing it. It is expensive and an investment, and even though we do save about 15% of our energy from investments in our solar, each building's a little bit different. King Philip actually is a very inefficient building. It's set up with a very sprawling roof, and it has air conditioning, which is very expensive to run. So the impact of that is much less on the impact on Town Hall. Town Halls are actually going to make a bigger impact on the total energy consumption. So it's great.
Sure.
I want to thank you. Great presentation.
Oh, thank you.
Terrific. I'm thrilled to hear that West Hartford is doing great things, and we're kind of leading, by example, if not, in some sort of broader collective. But I had no idea, right? So if I hadn't come here tonight, I had no idea. How do we promote this, and how do we, get the word out and get people excited about, this is, think locally and kind of get things, more in the mainstream.
Well, Owen obviously did a great job of promoting this event, and working. WHCTV now has broadcasted, so it will touch more people. Sustainable CT is a new initiative, and I think that will also get a lot of coverage, and people will start to think about that. But what was so special about Owen's project it was such common sense about where is this coming from? How is it impacting us, and the amount of impact it has? And so that takes people's interest in education. So we will work on that. I take your comments very seriously, but we do have to educate the public. And I at the state level, we have a Department of Energy and Environment that could, I think, also help with getting the word out. Yes.
Confidence in them is going down.
I know,
so-
yeah, well, yeah. They do have the knowledge of the impact, not necessarily fixing the problem, but they do understand the impact. And if any of you have ideas on how to
Sure.
help with that.
So to chime in here, from my perspective, I think that the best that we can do is to keep it in our minds, to consider it. And bring it up and to talk about it. That's how our society processes issues, through hundreds and thousands of conversations that you have, I think. So get involved in the conversation. There are a lot of different ways. Miss Rowe had in her list that she wanted to write. She said that I could share this with everyone. She said that it would be great to write a letter to the editor. It would be great to write an op-ed. It would be great to get the word out about events like this, events that are happening around the state and more broadly in order to get people's attention. For instance, the Mayor's National Climate Action Agenda that I mentioned at the beginning, and 2 or 3 hands went in the air, I think. That got into the press, and that was a way that mayors attempted to position themselves on that global scale. The only thing you can do to help them is to try to listen, to try to realize the impacts in their community and talk about them and move forward.
Our Clean Energy Commission does celebrate West Hartford. We're handing out light bulbs. You did LED light bulbs. So, stop by the booth, talk to them, talk about what you can do. I know Eversource does send energy audit options sometimes, and they'll talk about usage. But it's really networking and talking. We're also barraged with so much information. Get rid of your emails. Who knew, right?
Right?
But anyway.
I was just wondering, I noticed that the climate change has affected a lot of the trees, and I'm kind of worried about the West Hartford trees. And is there a fund that people can donate to a tree fund that we can set up, or is it?
Well, we could do the 200 million fund if you guys are interested. No, I'm teasing. Yeah, trees are very, very expensive to take care of, and usually Eversource or this will help with that. But you're right. We do what's critical that's going to impact that's hanging over power lines, but we don't necessarily take a tree down that that isn't apparently sick or ill or going to fall. So there is more work to be done, no question. So we'll talk about how we can put some money aside for that ongoing commitment, because it is.
Sure, Bernie.
I could just go back to that gentleman's comment. If you go back to energy events in the past, it was often large scale. So it would be like Millstone nuclear power plant or something like that. What's unique about this time is it really is at our scale. If we do it right, we can try to back there and put solar panels on your roof. We can buy a heat pump. I bought an electric car. It gets 133 miles to the gallon electric. These are things that we can do, and lifetime cost of my car is going to be lower than the gas.
Sure, I would definitely echo that. I think that the infrastructure for a lot of these, a lot of our electric cars is increasing all the time. There's a few power stations already in West Hartford. There's some popping up in Hartford. Batteries are improving, so the old picture that you have of like an extension cord on your lawnmower that doesn't really happen anymore. The batteries have gotten much better. Of course, nothing is perfect, but they're always improving. The best way that you have to get involved is to look into these options, actively consider them. You sit back and you say, that's some interesting information. Go in and see what the cost is. See if the lifetime cost of that vehicle makes sense. I just spent almost $50 filling up my gas tank, and it was a lot. I think that cost adds up over time. Sure, Henry.
Good presentation, Owen.
Thank you.
This is a comment on the home energy solutions audits. You're only free if you're low income.
Oh, okay.
The normal fee is about $150. The thing is, the value that you get from an audit is about $600 worth. They give out 10 or 20 LED bulbs, and they close up some of your openings, leaks in your home, and they give you a list of other things that you can do. And I think they give you coupons for energy efficient products that you can get. So the value is about $600 and about $150, and it takes maybe 3 or 4 hours to come across of the day.
Sure.
Because they're really fairly thorough. And just want to think, if people are concerned about learning more about energy issues, they can come to the Clean Energy Task Force meetings, commission meetings. They're monthly, I think, aren't they?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
It's true. Well, thank you. Henry was telling me before, he's somewhat of an expert in this area. So I really appreciate that. The information that I had about the free energy audits actually came from Mr. Schneider, who is somewhere around here. He came to the last Clean Energy Commission meeting and explained that his company does do those. So there are places out there that have, if I'm correct, he uses in part grants from various government and nonprofit sources in order to provide that, in order to allow the homeowner to really consider the cost, not have the prohibition of that upfront cost of hours and time and money to get someone in there. It's free. They make it easy and they come in and look around. Sure.
Mm-hmm.
It's true, and once you get into the issue, I learned from my research, you start to bounce from source to source to source, and eventually you come to this picture, and you find out there are a lot of options available for things you thought maybe weren't possible, and you realize that things can happen. That they're not this pie in the sky thing that will never occur. Sure.
Thanks very much for your presentation. I'd like to share an observation and see what your thoughts are. When I look at cities that I would consider truly radically forward-looking and radically sustainable, setting themselves clear goals, not 2050, but carbon neutrality 2025, 2030. Let's say Copenhagen. Let's say Oslo. I see cities that are radically different in their very design, and I see communities that are different in their very ethos. And then I go back to the place where I live, and I see a very different place. And so I'm wondering what your thoughts are there, because what is the design of those cities? Well, for starters, you see cities that encourage different modes of transportation. They encourage walking and biking. They discourage driving. And they do that in a very smart fashion. Do we do that? I mean, let's do some soul searching here. I think that most of us came here by car. It may be an electric car, it may be a hybrid, but we haven't even started to question the paradigm.
It's true.
What we need is a paradigm shift. And so I'm very worried that the 10 examples that you gave that are all wonderful are second decimal. They're second decimal. What we need is a radical questioning of the paradigm, because what we're looking at is the crisis of the 21st century. And yet we're thinking that in terms of time, we have until the end of the century to fix this problem. No. And then the question is, and this is a question for the mayor, what does this place, our city, need to look like and soon for this to become a truly sustainable place? Because what I'm seeing is traffic is becoming more and more dense. We live in a congested town. People are speeding like there is no tomorrow. Cars are getting bigger. I see people not daring to cross the street. My own kids, getting to the bus. They say, "Are you crazy?" People are driving 40 miles in a 25-mile zone. The thinking is not there. How do we then, and that's, I guess, the question, move into this paradigm and do this with the help of the mayor and the leadership in town and build momentum and build community around this most important issue?
Sure. So that was very well spoken. So I'll start. The cities that you mentioned, these European cities, are far and away some of the best cities that we have in terms of green development. But we're sort of shackled by our past, by the roads that we built back in the 30s, the 40s, the 50s, our highway system that relied on cars, that got rid of trolleys and wanted everyone to drive. So you see that in a lot of issues. We have the infrastructure already, and we're working with what we have. It would take often too much to reconsolidate people's living habits and push people into living in different ways. We have to drive here to this event because otherwise, if you walked, it might be 5 miles. And a lot of people don't have the time to walk in this, or the effort or energy to walk in this heat to get here. The best city that I found in terms of sustainability, one of them, I compared 3 in my thesis based on the literature that I found. The best one so far was New York, between New York, Chicago, and Seattle. New York has managed to achieve heavy emissions reductions. They've used their grid pattern and adjusted flows of pedestrians. They've widened, if you've been to Times Square recently, they widened it and eliminated some of the traffic from there. It actually improved the traffic, and it allowed people to enjoy it. You can sit on a lawn chair in Times Square now. It's pretty nice. And then another way that is helpful came from Carmel, Indiana, the use of roundabouts. But that mayor that I spoke with in Carmel, Indiana, Mayor James Brainerd, had the chance to develop his town as it was growing. It grew under his stewardship from about 25,000 people, if I recall, to about 75,000. So he had the chance to do what you're talking about. He had the chance to change our development patterns into a more sustainable way. He has people there who don't need a car anymore. They can walk to everywhere they need to go. So that is we're stuck with that challenge, and a lot of these solutions are ways to start knocking at it, to start knocking on that door and attempt to open it into a new vision of tomorrow.
I will just add that Owen is absolutely right. We have an old infrastructure that was set up very car-centric. But we, as West Hartford, did build 220 miles of sidewalk. We're a lot more walkable than many other communities. Some people do it, some people don't. We also are encouraging bicycle-friendly roads. We adopted a complete streets policy to help with traffic, to help with visibility, to help flow. But when you're a vibrant community, you have traffic, and we are a center for about an hour around us, we've determined, and people come to West Hartford for a lot of things, which is a good thing. But we want to give them some options. For the first time ever, I think you can live in West Hartford and not own a car. On New Park Avenue, you can, there's a new development on New Park Avenue. We changed zoning. It was an industrial zone. It's now a residential zone and an industrial zone, and people can live there. So it's a mixed income building, and that you can walk to the fast track station. We're looking to bike share programs where we've been talking about doing a dockless system, and so we're encouraging that. We still have, when we talk about North Main Street or Troutbrook Drive or the north-south routes, if we go down to one lane, it might increase people's trip by 2 or 3 minutes, but you might take people out of a car to bike or to walk. And it's just something our community is struggling very much with. They're not ready to make that jump, but the benefits, again, these are dramatic changes for our community, but we have to look at it. We looked at a reduction in trash potential. We received a lot of pushback from people in changing behavior. So there, as a mayor, we need, to push certain things, I want to encourage them. We're talking about, and this is the first time a couple of my colleagues have heard this, not Leon necessarily, but we're talking about bags, plastic bags. How can we get rid of plastic bags? What can we do? So I've heard a lot of pushback from people on that. So we do need to think differently. I was in Europe for a couple of weeks this summer. We took trains everywhere, internal to the city, external to the city. We didn't get in a car. So, that we don't have that system in the United States, unfortunately. But there are small things that we can do. And if you have ideas that you see, let us know, because we are willing and open-minded. We have limited resources. Yeah, I want to know we're working hard, and we've made a lot of progress. We have a lot to do, but, sorry.
So Mr. Buck was next.
Yeah, I'm John Buck. I would say, yeah, West Hartford, I really do think is handling the traffic situation quite well. And it's not automobile oriented. So many road projects are just designed to make room for more cars. I mean, and it's 84 to Waterbury. It's not, I mean, I don't care how big you make it, it's still going to be a pain, you know? But what I want to say about it is you started out with this, start small. And I'm thinking plastic bags. You know, plastic bags are a real nuisance as far as the stores push them on you. They almost demand you take every item in a separate plastic bag, you know, at the dollar store or these places here. They double bag them and stuff like that. And that's petrochemicals. I mean, you know, bagging and things, and they fill up our landfills, and they also blow around all over the streets still. So, I mean, you know, 40 years ago when I lived in Boulder, we charged money for bags.
Yeah.
You wanted a bag at the grocery, you brought your own. You say, put your own. I have my the trunk, I have bags in there for all kinds of stuff, you know. And you just go into the grocery store or any store I go into, I got a bag along, tucked under my arm to put if I need it, you know. If I get a quart of milk with a handle on it, I do not need it in a plastic bag. You know, and you know, I don't know how you change people's attitudes towards that, but you know, in the 60s, the 50s, and the 60s, when I grew up, we didn't have that. You know, same thing. You're talking about mowing the lawn. Well, you had a lawnmower. We didn't have leaf blowers and weed whackers and all this paraphernalia. I lived right on Fern Street, and we took care of a half-an-acre yard with push lawnmower, and you know when you started with a little motor in it and stuff like that. You didn't need all this stuff. You know, we have conveniences. We have things we think we can't live without, but we can. You know, the state of Washington, those plastic straws, plastic knives and forks, got rid of them. You know, these things can be done. You know, you need to re-educate and just present to people, why do you need to have these, what you call conveniences or things like that? You know, I don't know how you go about that. You know,
Sure.
But you want to start small, get rid of, you know, start with plastic bags.
I hear what you're saying. That's why we gave out some reusable ones here tonight, right?
Yeah.
So you start that way. I know in Washington.
I lecture people when they try to give me a bag. I say, I give it back.
Most urban centers have eliminated
this
them.
bag? It's
Yeah.
got a handle on here. I can take it home. Thank you. Save your bag.
Yeah, no, I know a lot of the college kids around me in Washington. There's that same tax on the plastic bags. They bring in just a big reusable canvas one, even bigger than the ones that you get at the store sometimes. I've seen people, if they have to walk a distance, using a duffel bag to carry stuff. And really, the average plastic bag is used for about 10 minutes. You know, you put it in your car, and then it ends up at home and maybe in your garbage. So it's just about a few yards trip from the grocery store to your car, and then usually from your car to your house. So it's just about eliminating that. So maybe throw an old duffel bag in your car and use that to schlep your stuff just outside. And
That is something we're discussing, actually, and it's going to be, our council will be looking at that.
So I think was there another question? Bernie, yes.
This is just a quick fun idea, in furtherance of this comment. Why don't we have some sister or brother cities in Europe? I think we
It's a great idea.
Fun. I think we could do it at the citizen level. I think we could do it at the elected official level. And I think they'd like to come here too. And I think we could learn a lot.
We actually have one in Israel, but we don't have, in Western Europe, but that is, Israel's they've done some things, but like in Amsterdam or Kappa, yeah, I mean, it's, yeah.
Oh,
Yeah,
great.
yeah.
There you go.
So, I mean, they've done so much, and
It
there's,
could be a lot of fun.
Yeah. that's a great suggestion.
Yeah, I was going to comment on like the North Main project or the trash bag program, and you say there's pushback, and I mean I was at the trash meeting, so I heard some of those comments, but I'm wondering like, is it just a minority, like a few people that are upset, or is there broad polling that's being done? Like where are we basing the decision not to go forward off of? Because I saw this example of a program in Spain where they did a citywide pull on bike infrastructure, and they were kind of surprised to figure out there was like 70 to 75% support, and that really like was an impetus to actually, follow through and implement it. So I'm wondering, like, what does the polling say versus, the few people at the meeting who get upset?
No, that's a great point, because a lot of times those loud voices can drown out the many that agree. We did get significant feedback from the meetings, and our public works director he thought about a third of the people were completely opposed, about a third of the people were in between, and about a third of the people supported the program. So we're sort of in the middle, and we are going to take some steps to modify, not only for environmental reasons, but for economic reasons. There's no place to throw our trash. We don't have landfills in the Northeast, and our tipping fees are going up, and now trash has to be transported to, either China or, to the middle of our country, or even on barges to China. So it's a very, people don't think about the life of that, whatever item it is that they throw in their can. It just goes away. There's a real expense to it, and we've talked about that, is a utility cost. It's a utility cost because it's a limited resource, right? You're using it, that cost of that item that you throw away has significant environmental impact, all to get it to wherever it's going to sit in the ground and rot and maybe produce CO2. So it's a problem, and we have to educate. We do need to do something, and we're making steps, but I don't think we're at that point where we're like Spain is, where the majority supports. But we can't stop talking about it, and we can't stop making steps to make those changes. Not to say that we don't do it, or we just do it no matter whether people agree or not. We're making steps, and I think people need to learn you're here. This is not a cross-section of all of West Hartford. You're here because you're interested in this subject. So we need to get more people interested and updated.
So I have 2 points to add to that. As Leon Davidoff, town councilman, is in the back there, and I've heard him bring up before that while it's a cost, like Mayor Cantor is explaining, a significant cost to get rid of our garbage, we actually get paid for recycling. So there's a lot of trash that people put in the opposite bin, and if we just decided to put more of it in our recycling bin, we'd actually make some money as a town. And the second point that I have is, while solid waste is really important, it's important to assess their impact wherever it is, and there are emissions impacts all around there. The heavy hitters that are more than, as was said earlier, that single decimal range are things like transportation. So modifying the amount that you drive your car or getting a more fuel-efficient vehicle is one of the best ways to impact it. Unfortunately, trash and solid waste isn't an issue. It's an issue for our time, but it's going to be there. The stuff is still going to be rotting in the future. The impact that we're looking at right now is emissions, and if those don't slow down, we start to see the heaviest impacts, and we can't even get to the solid waste in time. So that's what I found from my research, and that's what I'd like to highlight tonight. And I saw some questions back there. I think we have time for maybe one more.
Leon had
one or two.
We were piloting, yes, but there's not a facility yet to take the food waste and get rid of it. There's also, we were testing it and obviously for interest and for animal safety, because we don't want bears. We have a lot of bears in our community, and coyotes and all that. So it has to be a safe way. We think we might have that opportunity to do it safely, but we don't really have a partner yet and a facility to get the food waste. But I think Leon had a question. Leon?
Thank you, Cheri. Owen, great presentation. Thank you for bringing this very important issue that affects our entire globe to West Hartford to raise that consciousness. Cheri and other members of the council, we've taken a very forward-thinking approach to energy, and you'll notice it in housing alternatives where we have reuse of property, encouraging people to walk, try to find other ways for people to bike, encourage mass transit alternatives, encourage people when they bring projects to West Hartford to be more energy efficient in terms of the footprint that they're building on their site, have places for people to park their bicycles, have people have charging stations for their electric cars. So my question is, you talk to a lot of local leaders across the country, and I don't think that we're West Hartford. I do think that we're unique as West Hartford, but I do think we are the leader. And my question is, in your discussions with these other leaders, were they commenting that they're saying when they're discussing development opportunities, how they're making their communities more efficient and accessible? And the other thing that Mayor Cantor says quite often is our children, the millennials, okay, you're a different breed of person. They don't want a lot of material things in the way that things were done prior. You're happy to walk places, you're happy to go with the reusable bag, you're happy to live in cities, and you pointed out we're going to have 6.3 billion people living in cities soon. So these things are all changing, and it's going to change our global economy, our global environment. And I just want to know if you got that feedback from other community leaders across the country.
Sure. Yes. Yes. That's the answer to the first part of your question. The mayors that I spoke with were all concerned, as I showed you at the beginning. They were concerned about the impacts of the changes in our environment on their communities, and they were concerned about acting on it. Often that was through a grassroots upswell of popular discontent with federal policy, or it was due to a few local residents who took pride in the environment. In particular, Mayor John Engine's community in Missoula, Montana stands out for me. Their economy, in some sense, relies on tourism. In Montana, you've got those great big vista views. It's beautiful out there. But when that environment begins to degrade, people don't want to come, and the forest fires are dangerous. So yes, that they are thinking about that. There are a lot of other benefits to LEED buildings other than the efficiency aspect. There's a study out that I looked at for my thesis that says when workers come into an LEED building, that's leadership in energy and environmental design, by the way, it's a standard for building construction, people are happier coming to work because a lot of it is natural light coming in. You have these great thick walls. It would be a pretty nice place to work and probably a nice place to live if we built to that standard. And that might please some millennials as well.
That's right. It approved. We actually have a 100-year-old facility. It's Legrand Manufacturing. They were a French company, but their North American headquarters is in West Hartford. And they actually, with this 100-year-old building, became Gold LEED certified, which was a significant challenge. And that was in the papers. And I don't think it got the recognition that it deserved and the effort that went into that. So that is a company that they manufacture a lot of digital controls for thermostats and for phones and all electronic things. But a very, very cool company, and we should be very proud. They're in West Hartford, LEED Gold, 100-year-old building.
Great. And I think we might have time for one more question, if there's one more out there.
Just a comment about Miami. They're not doing the $200 million for nothing. They, for a number of years, they've already had flooding
That's
on
right.
regular basis in some of their areas. And so they're going retroactively, and they're not necessarily being proactive, but they already have problems that they're trying to address.
It's true. If you read coverage from Miami, there's reports of people's cars being rusted out by the water coming up. There's store owners who regularly keep bags of sand nearby to throw at their windows and their doors so they don't get the flooding coming in when it does happen. Miami is in a different situation. They're very low in terms of sea level, and they have a more porous bedrock that allows the water to literally seep up under the foundations that are there. But you're right, they are sort of being retroactive. It hasn't gotten to the worst yet. There is at least one mayor from the Miami area, a professor of science, who is calling for the entire city to be abandoned and relocated somewhere else because of the impacts that are going to be there.
Wow, fire sale.
So that's how it is down there. And the point is here, we still have time. We have time to get up and get active, but we really do need to act now. The Paris Climate Accord, studies around the Paris Climate Accord showed that if the actions that different countries pledged were taken, we might have more of a chance of beating this issue. But with America's withdrawal And with stalling on the international level, we really do rely on the localities to come up and pick up the slack. That's really where we're going. With that, with all the questions, thank you so much for coming out tonight. Thank you.